Alright, assalamu alaikum everybody. If everyone could have a seat. Everyone seems to be seated. I'm just being extra this morning. Alright. My name is Aisha Gulam. I am from Michigan. Whoever's from Michigan, can you raise your hand? Alright, we are the best, absolutely. So, just wanted to go ahead and welcome everyone to Parallel Session B. This particular topic right now is going to be on Imam's role in mental health. We have a lot of great and extremely talented, intelligent, mashallah, panelists with us. I am going to introduce everyone individually before their specific subsection. They will speak on their topic, and then we will go to the next. I ask that if you have any questions, just go ahead and write them on an index card, and then we will collect them and, ask accordingly. Okay? Any questions before we get started? All right, wonderful. And those of you who are going to be leaving the room, just do so quietly. Don't bang the door. Just dip out quietly. Okay? All right, so the first topic is training imams about domestic violence, best practices, and preliminary outcome evaluation. And I want to go ahead and introduce our speakers who will be speaking together. The first one is Dr. Fatima Mirza. Dr. Fatima Mirza is a PhD as well as having a Master's of Social Work. She completed her PhD in Social Work. She has a Master's degree in Sharia Sciences, is currently working towards licensure in Social Work. Her dissertation research focused on improving our understanding of Muslim youth identity and the factors related to Muslim American youth engagement and risk behaviors. Fatima has a long history of community volunteerism and activism. Please give Dr. Fatima Mirza a round of applause. Then I wanted to go ahead and introduce her co-speaker, Salma Abugideiri. I'm trying really hard here. She is a licensed professional counselor in private practice in Northern Virginia. She has a master's degree in counseling and human development and a postmaster's certificate in marriage and family therapy. She provides individual and family therapy specializing in trauma treatment and marriage counseling. She's also the director of training for the Peaceful Families Project, an organization focused on domestic violence prevention. She has several publications, including the chapter Domestic Violence in Counseling Muslims, Handbook of Mental Health Issues and Interventions. She is also the co-author of Before You Tie the Knot. So please go ahead and give both our speakers a round of applause.
Assalamu alaikum. Really excited to be here. We're going to try to figure out where we should stand and without blocking, and also so that we can see the presentation. So really glad that you all are here this morning. We're going to share our work, the results of sort of a program evaluation of the Imam trainings that we do, and to give you a little bit of background about the training itself and then the program evaluation that we've done. So we're really excited to have this opportunity to talk to you about this work. So as probably all of you know, domestic violence is something that affects everyone, everywhere. It's not specific to any community, faith community or otherwise. And of course, domestic violence exists in the Muslim community as well. And we know that imams are often the first point of contact for families who are in distress, whether it's domestic violence or mental health needs. And so the Peaceful Families Project, a national nonprofit organization, focuses on domestic violence prevention, and we do that by offering training for imams, community leaders, and service providers. And we've developed a lot of materials. I invite you to look at our website, peacefulfamilies.org, peacefulfamiliesproject.org. And so one of our signature programs is the imam training that we do. Our training objective is basically to help imams be better prepared to prevent as well as to respond to domestic violence in a way that is helpful to the family and the survivor affected by domestic violence. And to that end, we have had these trainings since the beginning of our organization in the year 2000. Initially, there was very little interest from imams in attending our training, and alhamdulillah, for the past few years, we have turned imams away because there has been so much interest as imams are grappling with these real cases and realizing that they really want to have the tools to deal with it more effectively. In 2010, we decided that we would create the trainings exclusively for imams, so that imams are just learning with their peers and not part of a larger training with other community leaders, and we've actually found that to really help in terms of their attendance and sustained interest in the training. In 2014, we added chaplains to the training simply as a result of the demand. Chaplains wanting to have the training, and we didn't have the resources to do a training for imams and then a separate one for chaplains. So we've added chaplains to our training. Our training model is a co-facilitator model between a practitioner and an imam, and it has been also a male and female. So we model that collaboration through our training. We teach from within the Islamic paradigm, and we integrate practice and application. Our goal is to provide a safe space for the imams so that they can really maximize the opportunity to learn, as well as to be vulnerable with each other. And so we've had a lot of self-disclosure about the imams' own experiences with violence in families. We engage with them in a critical analysis of theological concepts. We look at the intersection of domestic violence, spirituality, mental health, culture, and religion. And we also look at the intersection of family law, state by state, depending on which state we're doing this in, as well as Islamic family law, because imams have to help families navigate the legal issues that come up when dealing with domestic violence. We give them lots of opportunity for experiential learning. We have case studies, and we engage them also in reflection. As you know, many imams just really don't have the time to do that type of learning in their regular jobs, so we try to give them that opportunity. We emphasize the importance of safety, as well as working collaboratively with other professionals, so that they don't feel like they have to take this load on by themselves entirely. And we also give them a lot of resources, educational materials, and hope that they will continue to seek out resources after the training. Our conclusion of every training is that the imams sign a proclamation that they will take a stand against domestic violence, that they will continue to work with other professionals when they go back to their communities. Because we're flying these imams usually in Northern Virginia, so they're not in their community when we're doing the training, and they're making this commitment to go back. And so we use that sort of peer opportunity to encourage them all to make this commitment. And then we collect feedback at the end of the training. We historically have just done an evaluation at the end of the training. Last year we were very fortunate to partner with Fatima Mirza, a researcher and social worker, to do a formalized program evaluation, and she'll talk to you about that.
So this was the first time that we were able to do a formalized program evaluation of this program, and we looked at the 2018 cohort. There was a total number of 16 imams and chaplains that were registered. And as you will see, we had 15 at the pre-test complete the survey, and at the end we had 11 at the post-test, and in the follow-up we had 7. And so I'm going to be referencing those numbers all the way through. And for those of you who are familiar with program evaluation, normally we look for a curve in program evaluation where the people generally start out at whatever level they're at. They go up when they have just completed the training. They tend to lose a little bit at follow-up, but we hope that at follow-up they're still maintaining some growth from the beginning. And so because we have such a small sample size, we did check for statistical significance in all of the things that I'm going to be presenting, but we're just looking for that same curve, whether or not they maintain those things. So we used a survey that was modeled off of a survey called PREMIS, which is the Physician Readiness to Manage Intimate Partner Violence Survey, and it is geared towards physicians. It's super long. So we had to edit it down to keep the relevant constructs that were applicable to Imams, and then to be able to modify the language so that it was also relevant to the experience of the Imams. And then we added some additional questions so that we could better get a sense of the context that the Imams were operating in, and whether or not their experiences in that context were also impacting how they were receiving the training. The survey was fairly short, and because we tracked people with ID numbers, we were able to keep it short and to ask certain context questions at each time point, so they didn't have to fill out a really long survey at each point. So the constructs that we looked at were demographic questions, age, race, previous training, education, things like that. Context questions were things like whether or not they're vested by the board, whether or not their board was supportive of their counseling role. We also asked questions because between the end of the program and the time we were going to be contacting them for follow-up, Ramadan happened, and we know that Ramadan is very different than our normal everyday life, and so we asked a couple of questions about how Ramadan impacts the needs of families in their community. Then the rest of these constructs are from the premise measure. So there's 2 sets of questions that happen at the beginning of the measure that ask about how confident are you to, and then it asks about, for example, identifying domestic violence, making a report, intervening, providing referrals, and then also what is, how prepared do you feel you are to, and then asks a set of questions on those same sorts of actions. And then the last set of questions look at kind of their real life knowledge and action. So there are a set of questions that ask them, like, for example, what is one thing that is often true about people who commit domestic violence? So testing whether or not they actually had knowledge about this issue. And then the actual actions and actual referrals are things that they actually did in a case that they had identified in their own community. So at pre-test, you can see that these were the questions that we asked, the constructs. At post-test, these were the questions that we asked. And then at follow-up, those are the questions that we asked. So we had 15 people complete the pre-test, and you can see we have a wide range of ethnicities and a wide range in age. In terms of education, you can see that we had a fairly educated group. They had a wide range of religious training. About half had some sort of religious degree program that I read to be something that was here, but I may be wrong. It was a free response question, so they typed in whatever they had. A lot of people identified ijaza or traditional schooling or some sort of other training, a certificate, for example. And 7 said that they had some sort of counseling training. Previous training about domestic violence, 2 reported that they had none. The rest had some sort of training. The majority had said that they attended a lecture or talk, or attended a skills-based training, or had watched a video on the topic. So at post-test, we had 11 complete the survey. We administered it right after the training, and then we also made it available for people to complete on their own. So about half completed it there, and the rest completed it when they got back to their home communities. And we had 7 people at follow-up. This was a 2 to 3 month follow-up. 2 months is when the link actually went out, but it took some time for some people to complete it. And as you can see, this group is a little bit older than the group that completed it in the other 2 time points. The really nice thing, though, is that the 7 people that completed this survey had also completed the follow-up and the pretest, so we're able to watch that group through time. So in terms of how confident they are, and these are the different things, we see that all of the questions have that curve that I was talking about. So I'm not going to go into lots of detail on all of these. Same information in the bar chart. In terms of preparation to act, and I should note that the ones in parens are that subgroup that had completed all the way through. So you can see how the whole group mean was, and then what the subgroups mean was, and so you can watch how those 2 groups changed over time. Again, same information as the bar chart. So all of them are following that same sort of trend that we hope to see. What is interesting is that the subgroup of imams that completed the first survey and who also went all the way through had reported that they had lower levels of confidence about their ability to know what to do in these situations. But when you look at these knowledge scores, they're about equivalent. So this group of imams that completed it all the way through kind of really felt like they needed this training, even though they tended to know about the same amount as everyone else. And you can see that subgroup gained a lot in post-test and kept gaining at follow-up, which is kind of odd. And so you can also see the same information in a bar chart. We did not collect actions or referrals at post-test because they hadn't gone back to their community yet. So the particular items that were in the action score, because that was the one that seemed to go down as a result of the training, you can see that counsel clients on options was the most highly endorsed answer by all of the imams, followed by provided information to client. The thing that seems to have dropped a little bit is the safety planning, but as we're going to see in a little bit, the additional actions which are not included in this action sum is that the amount of referrals have gone up tremendously. The other thing of note of this subgroup of imams is that offered validating and supportive statements, their mean at pretest was much higher than the mean of the whole group, which means to me at least that these individuals felt very connected to the people that they were trying to help. Maybe they even felt very emotionally impacted, but that's something that we'd have to ask them about. And see the same information in the bar chart. So obviously we have a small sample size. We don't know the power of these findings. We're dealing with self-report, so that has its own flaws. We also don't know the prevalence of DV. We know that the imams who attended the training at pretest, 80% of them said they had seen at least one case of domestic violence in the last 6 months. The imams that answered it at follow-up said that 75% of them had answered yes to that question. But we don't know how many of those cases repeat. So that's one of the issues. The actions variable is flawed in one way because the time that the pretest asked was about 6 months. And then at follow-up, we asked in the past, since the training, which was about 2 to 3 months. So there's some problems with that, which means that the actions variable going down might be reasonable because they may not have seen as much cases, but the referral score going up might be even more powerful than we can estimate. So these are the outcomes in terms of evaluation, and I'm going to pass it back to, I'm going to just put these up there, and I want to skip to the slide because I want to remember that imams are human. So this is some of the qualitative stuff that they told us at the end. And we're happy to elaborate on anything else in the question and answer time, but we wanted to thank you for your attention and look forward to discussing it.
I think we can do a lot better than that, guys. I know it's early, but let's do it loud and proud. All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, sisters. So our next guest speaker on the topic of Imam's role in mental health is Imam Kafani Cisse, one of my favorite people personally. So I was told, because there are such incredible bios of everyone, that I have to shorten the bio. So I just want to go ahead and give a disclaimer that my short bio does not do this man justice. So let's go ahead and give him credit where it's due. Imam Kafani is an imam in Detroit who studied for 15 years in Senegal, West Africa. He is well versed in the Islamic sciences of spirituality, jurisprudence, contemporary Islam, and Black African American history. He's a nationally recognized speaker and a pillar in the Detroit Muslim community. Please give a round of applause for Imam Kafani.
والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره ومقدار عظيم أما بعد. First of all, I would like to thank and congratulate Dr. Abbasi, and especially my mentor, Dr. Halima Naim, for their work with the Islamic community. They're the same as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it's to show that every believer that we should create a structure in which we're like bricks that build a wall. You can't build a wall with a brick. What they said, or a hand. You can't have a hand with one finger without a thumb, without a pinky. And this is the problems that imams have to fight at this time too. Truthfully, one sister asked a question the other day, and I have to truthfully speak out as imam. I'm glad that he came yesterday, but I felt bad that I was the only imam here for imams training. First of all, the imams have to understand the importance of the mental health issues. Second of all, as an imam, we have to be aware that there are some imams with mental health issues. How can they help someone with mental health issues if they don't solve their mental health issues themselves? And then looking at this, and I'm glad that this presentation of domestic violence, because it's something that me, being in Detroit, Michigan, that I deal with often. What we have to do is retrace our steps to the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Sahaba, and the Tabi'in, and those who came after them, because these two practices of mental health were one at one time for us. When did they become divided? And when did it get into the point in which we became opposing to each other? And so this is a fitna in this community, and it's beautiful that it is the practitioners at this time are reaching out to the imams. We need more of this at this time because the imams themselves, we need help. There's some issues that I can't deal with. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed me with some counseling qualities. But when we look at these qualities and you deal with the grief, or you deal with the affairs that you may deal with weekly as an imam, I'm happy that I have someone to lean on, such as Dr. Halim Naim, to help with those issues. Because wallahi, most of the imams in America, they can't deal with all these issues. Astaghfirullah. There are some imams, because of the issues, they turn their back. And this is not the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Did he ever turn his back on anyone? And we know that if Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if he was a mercy for all of the world, for all of us and everywhere, then the imams themselves should be a mercy for the community. And how can you create mercy for someone that you don't understand? Or how can you create mercy for an issue that you don't want to understand or want to apply yourself in? The thing that you all have to do is keep pushing forward. I know of the issues that you might have within immigrant communities. I know the issues that you might have in African American communities. There's some masjids you just can't walk into. There's some masjids, even me myself, I've walked into a masjid and they thought I was an agent. Because of the way I dress and act, most people see me, they think I know exactly where and directly where are you actually from in Africa? I said, no, I was born in Flint and I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. They're like, no. Where are you from? I was born in Flint and I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. Okay, so you've been Muslim all your life. No, I didn't become Muslim until I was 21 years old. Well, where did you study at? Medina? No, I studied in Africa. Well, where did you learn Arabic from? No, I studied in Africa. So there are so many stigmas that I, as an African-American man, have to deal with. Look at the other stigmas that we have to deal with in the community. First of all, the issues that I have to speak out in those communities now are issues with young women. There's a great stigma and a problem in our communities dealing with our young women. There are a lot of problems that have happened at home that I have to deal with. And there are a lot of problems that Jewish practitioners that you know that you have to deal with, and at times they're trying to sweep it under the rug or close the door on these issues. Alhamdulillah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a deen which should have rahmah in it, but some of the leaders, they don't have much rahmah. We should seek refuge from that. The best thing that I can say, especially dealing with the role of the Imams, dealing with mental health issues in the communities, is that the Imams themselves, they deal with mental health issues all the time. I didn't know the description of the things that I dealt with until this conference. I didn't know what a hyper-manic episode was, or a depressive episode was. I deal with those all the time. I know I deal with a lot of people with bipolar tendencies and many things like that. One of the greatest examples that Dr. Imam gave us, he gave us an example in which a husband and a wife were having a problem, and they kept attributing their problems to jinn. And it wasn't anything dealing with jinn, it was dealing with their own nafs. Islam gives you a very easy way to make an excuse for you being wrong or wronging someone, and that is to blame it on the jinn. We know that they're different. You know, most people know of the malaika, but do you know the essence of Allah, the light of the malaika, and the arwah, dealing with the rahani medium? You know of them when you deal with the things like the smurfs, you deal with jinn. Everybody thinks everything is jinn, and it's not. There's some things that Allah created and put with us here to help us, and if you don't understand this, then you won't be able to deal with it. Another thing that we have to become aware of is that a true teacher and a true imam, a true spiritual master, is someone who can help you, help your heart. We have to realize that we're trying to find imams, but every one of you is an imam. Every woman is imam of their own heart. Every man is imam of his own heart. All of us have a Kaaba, and that Kaaba should be your heart. But have you made tawaf around it? Have you stood at the Maqam of Ibrahim of your own heart? Have you dealt with the Safa wa Mala, the Ummah of your own body between your tendencies? And are you remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in it? And if you can't get this help, if you can't deal with this own heart, then you should be able to go to those who can help you. And alhamdulillah, I go to those who can help me in the situations in which I cannot help myself. And I go to the ones who can advise me in a way in which I cannot be able to give my own self-advice. One of the other examples is that the greatest problem with imams, even me myself, one of the examples I gave, is that my mother, she died at a young age. When I was 15, I was there with her, and just a few years ago, I lost my grandmother. That was an intense amount of grief for me to take away the women I know of in my life. And as an imam, I didn't have time to grieve. The day that I was with my grandmother, I was laying by her side. I sat there all night. She was a Christian. I was reciting prayers to God for her. I would wake up every 30 minutes just to look at her and see if she was breathing. And I dropped about Tahajjud. I wake up about 4:30. I woke up and she wasn't moving. I touched her forehead, kissed her forehead. I told my family. And my family, who were Christian, they got angry. They was like, why would she die with him in the room with her? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He replicated this for me. And I didn't even have to do, I had no time to do it with my group. At that time, I had to go ride from Detroit, I'm in Flint, Michigan. I drove an hour to lead the prayer, deal with all of my duties and everything, and deal with that 2 days later we were able to prayer. So Imams, they deal with an intense amount of grief. We need help. We need to get those who can help us. And those who can help us should incorporate those things with us. And please, practitioners, doctors, psychiatrists, and those who deal, stop dealing with this like we're ignorances. Stop being so condescending. Stop thinking that we're just some people who have just learned some Islam and know a few ayats. There's some of us who are grieving. There's some of us who are dealing with issues every day. So deal with us as if we were patients too, and have patience with us. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was made it clear to us that he said, "As-sabr yustajib." He said, half of your relief is being patient. My uncle used to say, be patient with each other before you're patient. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much, Imam Kafani. Our next speaker who will be speaking about Imam's role in mental health is Tempe's very own Imam Omar Tawil. Okay, I'm sorry. They told me to get everyone's names right before I came on. So he is the Assistant Imam of Islamic Community Center of Tempe. He is also the University Chaplain at Arizona State University. Please give a warm round of applause for Tempe's own Imam Omar.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعوذ بالله من شر الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. I don't know if I can be defined as Tempe's own yet. I've only been here for like 7 months. So I think I'll leave it to the natives of Tempe. Am I one of you guys yet or not yet? So I'm originally from Chicago, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, and I studied a little bit in the Middle East, but I found out that I personally, found it that Chicago itself has a reputation for having a lot of scholars, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, so I came back and I studied with them, while at the same time sort of gaining the experience that I felt like would then drive me towards chaplaincy, to then bring that type of training back to the masajid, because I started noticing a few things that were really insufficient about the training of imams, or the education of a lot of imams, or even the self-care that a lot of imams actually would have. Be that following a mentor, or be that going to a counselor themselves, or even if it was literally taking care of themselves the way they should, because sometimes the imam role in a mosque is really overwhelmed. It's overwhelmed not only from the community, it's not only overwhelmed from the expectations of a board, or the relationship of a board to an imam, but also an imam's family themselves as well. And oftentimes an imam is expected to work beyond office hours, to sort of show up in the AM, to show up late at night, to show up on days that they're supposed to be off, and that generally the imam is supposed to be free access 24/7, and of course, then when it comes to compensation, that adds another toll on the imam as well, and their families. So this really comes back to something that Imam Shaikh, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve this man and this pillar of our community, said something to me very young, when I was a very young man. He says, فَقِدُ شَيْءٍ لَا يُعْطِي. Right? The one who doesn't have something can't give it. So if we're going to be talking about imams having a very balanced perspective on mental health, not only with the community and how they treat the community or how they interact with the community, but how that community is then going to come seeking something from them. Because if the imam themselves are not seeking help, or are not acknowledging that they might even need help, how is it that they can then provide that help? And this not only comes from a network that they need. Both sisters were talking about, the research about imams saying that they will then network with other mental health professionals. They will network with legal professionals to see the options and routes that they can take when it comes to serving the Muslim community, particularly when it comes to domestic violence. But sometimes the Muslim communities come to the imam seeking help on issues like domestic violence. And subhanAllah, from my experience, there are sometimes imams themselves who have become violent people in this regard. Because again, they're not seeking help themselves, and they can't get the help that they need to then provide the help that the community needs. So it becomes a conundrum really when you have then people or a couple coming to an imam, whether it be physical or psychological or emotional abuse, and sometimes even spiritual abuse, right? Where there's different ideologies within the same home, or maybe there's even a different tendency of how each of the spouses practice their religion. That they come seeking counsel, they come seeking to put confidence in this imam, but because of the long trek or the long history of the imam not seeking help, the imam not gaining a very balanced ground, not just from an educational perspective, but again, their own inward reality or their own good way of living or their own wellness, they're going to an abuser to seek for advice or to seek advice from. That I've seen from a very young age, and I believe that I'm pretty sure everyone is familiar with some of the scandals that come up with imams throughout the country, and to divorce these two things is quite, I think, I feel like as imams we need to be talking about this more, but then also as mental health professionals we need to also be talking about this more, is that there seems to be a connection. And of course I know a little bit about research, although I hate research and statistics, but yeah, correlation doesn't equate causation, so I respect that with you guys. But there is a connection. There is a connection where sometimes you even see an imam condemn a particular thing a bit too much, but then they end up being guilty of that thing that they were condemning themselves. So again, I'm not going to say correlation equals causation, but there's something there. Whether you want to talk about the ruh and the ego, or even if you want to talk about maybe unresolved trauma. Especially with a lot of imams that come from, that are immigrants, or that maybe even are the sons and daughters of immigrants. When it comes to scholarship within the community, there's sort of this inherited sense of trauma that comes out that is undealt with, or it's not even recognized, it's not even spoken about, and then that just gets swept under the rug, and that becomes part of their training. That becomes part of their own tarbiyah, right? So it's something that, again, it's not only, we don't only have to be proactive about it, but we also have to sort of dig into people's past. And we also have to be doing something, inshallah, I guess you say, within the Muslim community that can provide imams with the chance to not only seek training while they're working, but also on the time off that they have. And what I'm really trying to promote is that imams can get sabbaticals. Because imams need a break. If an academic can get, or people in academia get sabbaticals, they get like 3 months off every 5 years to do more research, to look into their own field of study, to then maybe even center themselves, because academia, right, publish or perish, it becomes very I guess you say thwarting on their own selves. Why not an imam who is expected to work 24/7, is expected to come to people's homes, is expected to meet people in a variety of places, and sometimes is expected to take the work outside of the masjid, and not even in the home of somebody, but because there's even a stigma attached with everything that they can provide or everything that they can recommend. We're dealing with too many issues with an imam, right? But we're not even providing half or a fraction of what they actually need to get into those issues or to talk about those issues, or to even train themselves. So that's just something I guess you say is on my personal agenda. Go back to your communities and try to promote sabbaticals for your imams so that they can relax, and maybe that they can gain more knowledge, but even that they can gain more perspective when it comes to how to function in the community, but also so that they can seek their own help. Because again, they probably don't have enough time within a week to even see a therapist. Most imams themselves have that stigma. I don't want to recommend that you do counseling, so I'm not going to do counseling either. But those that even recommend counseling still carry a stigma of, I'm an imam, so I shouldn't need counseling. The counseling I get is in the Quran. The counseling I get is in the dhikr that I do. The counseling is, I might have a scholar who's a scholar of tarbiyah or tasawwuf or tazkiyah, but that's still not enough, right? There's a quote that I'm going to butcher right now. It comes from a book called 40 Rules of Love by Shaikh, where he says, the essence of the whole is significantly more important than the mere sum of its parts. So these are all parts that we can discuss, but we want to make sure that our imams are whole, right? We want to make sure that our mental health professional care providers are whole, that they don't only have a few functions that they can provide, and then we just keep them there, right? Because the danger that all of this has on imams in particular is that it sort of constricts their ability to empathize with those who come to seek with them, particularly a perspective that they might not understand all the time, which is usually the perspective of a woman. But it also prevents them from also seeing patterns, right? This is probably the most, I guess you can say, messed up thing that I've seen in my short career as an imam and as a chaplain, is that oftentimes imams become friends with community members. And when that friend and their spouse end up coming to the imam has a blinder. The imam has a big blinder, and they can't, or a blind spot, and they can't see that their friend, or a board member, or a big donor to the community, they can't see them for what they are or what they're doing. And again, this all comes down to a variety of factors. Again, if an imam doesn't have the training, how can they provide? If imam doesn't have time off to even seek their own mental health counseling, how are they going to really improve? And if imam doesn't have time off to even educate themselves or go to these retreats, most imams, by the way, don't take part in retreats like yours because they don't got the time, and the community doesn't believe that they deserve the time. And if they do believe that they deserve the time or that they give them the time off, then they have to pay it on their own dime, which then goes back to the compensation, which really isn't that great. So there's so many things that we can be talking about, but it all essentially comes back to training your imam not to just be a reciter of the Quran or a good orator in the khutbah, but also someone who can recognize what's going on in the community and can keep his finger or his hand on the pulse of the community and really see what's going on and try to then maybe educate based on that, right? How does an imam begin to recognize an abuser, right? It's not just aggression. Sometimes it's very manipulative, and sometimes it's very subtle. And it can fool the imam because the imam is friends with everybody. The imam has to be diplomatic with everybody. When it comes to an abuser, I don't think there's really much diplomacy that needs to be had other than maybe, I don't want to say anything more than that. But I don't believe in diplomacy at that point. That's my personal approach. You know, I feel like you've restricted yourself from deserving any empathy at that point, particularly if we notice certain patterns. But again, imams need to be educated, imams need time off, imams themselves need to be taken care of in order for them to take care of others, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much, Imam Omar. Now it's time for questions and answers. Real quick though, we do have round tables that are outside. However, it is not going to be used for the conference. It's actually going to be used for lunch. So please make sure you don't use them.
It's actually going to be used for another conference, so please don't sit there and directly take tonight. It's going to be another conference.
Okay, so they're not for us at all. Okay, so don't touch them. So now we're going to do a question and answer. Yes, Dr.
Thank you so much for bringing that point out, that we have to understand domestic violence in the broad spectrum, that it's not only that the woman is being beaten up, there is emotional abuse, manipulation. We know classically that these abusers are very manipulative. So how can we create more awareness around it? Do you use sermons to talk about the rights of women in religion? Any thoughts or any things that you have used right now?
So real quick before you answer that, that's a very, very good question, Dr. Abbasi. Aya will be coming around the room to collect anyone's note cards with questions. But if you want to go ahead and start off with the wonderful questions, appreciate that.
Bismillah. First of all, alhamdulillah, I don't know about a lot of communities, but me myself, I don't want to say I get in trouble, but I really don't hold my tongue. So I think at this time when you're dealing with the haqq, and there's one saying that we say haqq but haqq, the truth by the truth, you have to be real. You have to really be real. So we do attack a lot of, especially in the African American community, issues such as that from the minbar directly. And we speak on it. The problem is that some things get too personal at times. I can agree with what he said, people becoming friends with those in the community, but that doesn't do anything for me. I always tell people that I counsel and deal with, I'm not going to go to the hellfire for you and any of your issues. But at this time, I really do think amongst domestic, we do need domestic violence counseling, but also those who are bringing those training to them, especially me being imam, and I know that Imam Omar Tawil can say that if you're dealing with domestic violence issues, then you start to become a domestic violence victim yourself. I don't really, there are some very harsh issues dealing with domestic violence. If you start to hear it and you have to be just in it and everything, you become a victim yourself. So there are many things that we have to deal with that. And so the more training that imams get, the more understanding that the practitioners will give them in dealing with their own violence that they might be giving to their own psyche, the more that we can help each other, and for sure it's needed. And actually, it's left for a lot of things. I don't want it a small, I'm going to say that it is a small issue, but it's one of the major issues that we have to deal with imams, as imams in the community.
Assalamu alaikum. When it comes to khutbahs, I tend to not take my personal experiences of the week into that. Sometimes it's inevitable because sometimes you notice patterns that maybe a particular community is facing. Like when I was in Connecticut for about 2 years, and I was working as an imam there part-time as a chaplain at a college. But a very big pattern that I immediately recognized there that I didn't really experience in Chicago is that there was almost no route for a woman to go to if she was experiencing anything. And there seemed to be a very, I guess you say, I don't even want to say it's traditional, but a very, I guess you say a very abusive, friendly response to a woman who was either pleading with the community that, oh, you're doing this for whatever motive that you have underlined, whatever thing that we can use to assassinate your character. And that was just something that I had to address from the get-go. But I really tried to make sure that the imam themselves, or myself, I'm not being very emotional on the minbar, but sometimes you can't help it, because it's just something that the community tends to, every community is different, but there's always something that everyone's lacking. And sometimes, we get fed up, again, we're emotional too. But another thing when it comes to this is that I don't really talk about women's rights without talking about men's rights, because this is something that we also tend to, even mental health professionals, sometimes it becomes a stigma for them, is talking about maybe the woman in the relationship that also can become the abuser, right? And also how I don't talk about women's rights without talking about men's rights, so I really make that either a session, a premarital counseling type of thing. I don't really bring it up in the minbar that much, again, unless it's absolutely necessary. But how do we, I guess you could say, show people that there's a pattern that isn't cookie cutter when it comes to abuse? Personal anecdotes. I had a personal friend in my life who got along with everybody beautifully, and was a champion, I guess you could say, in his own right when it came to promoting Muslim sisters. And it really was a shock for us when his wife ended up approaching one of us that he was very abusive with his language, and never got physical, but always threatened with it. Was always threatening her with this physical display of his strength. And it got to a point where we kind of had a hard time believing it. We really had a hard time believing it just because of how much we knew this person and how much they, again, this is why I mentioned it, they condemned this type of thing. But then they turned out to be someone who was guilty of whatever it is that they were condemning. So again, we're not going to say that now everyone who condemns something, they're guilty of it. But again, how do we then just, I guess you say, show that abuse doesn't come in a cookie cutter fashion, it doesn't all look the same? How do we find the manipulators from the people who you can, we would even probably profile? Oh, that guy has a short patience, he's definitely abusive, right? And I'm pretty sure that's like most men, right? My mom always challenged my father, you guys always say that women are emotional, anger is an emotion, so you men are terribly emotional, right? So that was something that I got from the get-go as a kid, like, yeah, men are just as emotional, we just try
try to be more, I guess you say, archaic about how we display our emotions. But anyhow, I think avoiding the cookie cutter, knowing that there's a variety of patterns that you need to be looking out after, and maybe sometimes sharing personal anecdotes will be beneficial for a community, because sometimes it's not the imam that's actually uncovering this, it's community members that are uncovering it amongst themselves. Yeah, and you don't want them to be able to turn a blind eye or even make that an option for them, really, inshallah.
And people who are interested in hearing more about the partnership model, Salma is going to be presenting a lot about that tomorrow. And this training is also an outgrowth of a partnership, really, between an imam and a therapist. And I think it's really important to kind of speak to some of the needs that the imams have. If they can't go out and read, then they're going to learn in that relationship as well, right? So until we can build the time to get sabbaticals, a short-term solution is to have these relationships so that the imams have the appropriate knowledge then to pass on to others.
Okay, we're running a little short on time, so if everyone could just restrict their responses to about 30 seconds, I'm so sorry. But we need a bridge between imams and mental health professionals. What would this bridge look like? E-consultation online, open phone lines for imams, and call for consults. So what would be some ideas to bridge the gap?
Since we're short on time, I would suggest you come to our session tomorrow morning at 9, which is what we're going to talk about. And the short answer is build relationships. We can't just pick one of those. It's got to be in the context of a relationship.
Okay, so we do have another session that will be taking place in this room. I believe it's on mental health stigma. So once more, please give a very warm round of applause for our 4 panelists. Thank you so much.